Well, last week we almost got through kind of the introduction to the parables. There was just a couple other things that I was going to bring up, but basically we went over what a parable was. I stumped you on the first parable of the Bible.
David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you weren't here, were you?
No.
Yeah.
That would be the first
You
one.
probably listened to the lesson, though, didn't you?
No, I haven't yet. I'm going to. I was right. I didn't know if there was one before that.
No, I think that was the
Okay.
one in 2 Samuel,
Yeah.
where David was.
Yeah, we gave him the parable of a rich man killing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
You're so smart.
yeah.
I got lucky, okay? I've been studying that about David, so.
Yeah. So, and the parables, he explained to them that they were to those that had an open heart, receptive to the word, would be able to understand them. Those that did not, it was confounding to them. They couldn't understand. They didn't have ears to hear, and that's what he explained in Matthew 13 there. And there was many amongst the crowd that were like that. They didn't want to hear it. They had already rejected any teachings because he had been teaching for quite some time. And they were trying to catch him up in all kinds of things. They show up at this gathering here at the sea, and they're trying to catch him up again, and he starts speaking in parables. And that's when they couldn't understand. Did you have a question? Oh.
Jeff?
Yes.
So my question would be, David was a specific, and it was a true story. Now, the parables of the New Testament, are they specific to anybody, or are they just, they're all in general. And I'm just having trouble correlating that as a parable.
Or a metaphor.
Yeah, because it was specifically for David.
Right.
Christ-
What's the difference between a parable and a metaphor?
Yeah. It gets confusing to me. I just don't get it.
Well, I guess
It
it's
could be called either one.
basically telling a story that can be applied spiritually. And with David, he was telling the story of a rich man and a poor man. And David's listening to the story, but he's not catching it until he says, "You're the man."
But
Yep.
that story only applied to him. The parables seem like they're more general, and they
Well-
apply to everybody, so.
Yeah, I guess you could say general, but then when hopefully we'll be able to get to the sower of the parable, or the parable of the sower tonight, and that's talking about, you could say general, but you could apply it personally. You could apply it individually. Because it's talking about the sower, it's talking about the soil, talking about the sea. You can get that specific, or you can look at it as a general. Because when we get into that, there's 4 types of soil. Which one are we? Is that applied to us in general, or is it basically tell us what we are? Because we're going to be one of the 4. Specifically, we're going to be one of the 4. So to me, that means it's a personal thing.
But it applies to everybody.
Well, yeah, it does.
That story only applied to him, so.
Well, it was only told to him.
it's still-
But you know what? You could apply that story to anybody here today. You could apply that story to anybody.
It wasn't for anybody back then. It
Yeah.
just seems different. It doesn't seem like it's this.
Well, I guess you could argue either way, that maybe it wouldn't be considered a parable, more of a metaphor. But I think the main thing is that what he was trying to get across to David in a way that David was not going to understand any other way.
Whether it's a parable or a metaphor, it's still there for us to learn from.
Oh, it's a learning. Right.
And he couldn't have done it any other way. If he had approached David straight up, David probably would have had him in prison. This way,
Oh, yeah.
he made David think and David came to his own conclusion.
Mhm.
So,
Right,
Because David's heart was right.
right,
right. And that's also one of the things. He was receptive to the metaphor or the parable.
the story.
He was, the story. He was receptive to it. He understood it. Now, when we're looking at some of these parables in the New Testament, it is to the crowd, but there's some there that are not receptive at all. They've already closed down. They've already decided, nope, we're just going to try to catch him in some kind of teaching that we know is going to go against the law or what we have established as the law. And that's when he started talking in parables to confound them, because they couldn't understand what they were talking about. Because that was one of the sections that we went through last week in Matthew 13, when he says, you know, the disciples came to him and asked him, why do you speak to these people in parable? And he explained to them why. And a lot of the parables relate to the kingdom, and that was one thing that the Jews could not understand, the spiritual kingdom. They were still in the physical. They wanted a physical king. They wanted basically Rome wiped out so that they could rule. And that's not what happened. Christ came with a spiritual kingdom, and he was trying to teach them all about this spiritual kingdom.
And wasn't it prophesied he would speak in parables?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was prophesied. So that's another thing. It fulfills prophecy when he speaks in parables. So that's just another confirmation that all the prophecies in the past came true.
Well, you also have to understand at the time, most of these people were basically ignorant.
Yep, illiterate.
And the way they can understand stuff was talking about sheep, talking about lamps and wedding feasts
Right.
and different things like that. That's the way they can relate to what Jesus
Right.
is trying to say, you know.
And as we said last week, it's easier to remember a story. It's easier to remember something. It's easier to apply it. It's just like David on that one. He was able to apply that story and say, well, that was wrong. And then it's brought right back on him. And that's what, I mean, the crowd of people gathered at the sea. He's in the boat teaching. There's a multitude of people there that probably don't know how to read, have never been, had the opportunity to that. They're mostly oral. Everything was transferred by mouth. Telling stories around the campfire or whatever, at home around the table. These were easy to remember. And as he says, those that have ears, let them hear. As we read these parables, is our ears open? Do we hear what is being said? Because this first one, the parable of the sower, Jesus explains that one out. Some of them he doesn't really explain totally out. It's up to us to hear what he's trying to say. And that's one thing that I don't know how many we're going to go through, the parables, there's a lot of them. But hopefully we can look at these and hear what he is trying to say to us through these parables. And maybe they won't apply to us specifically, but it is for our learning. Anything that comes out of the Word is for our learning. And basically, we've already established it was to hide the truth from the unbeliever, the one that wasn't ever going to believe it anyway. And it wasn't that he didn't, because it was impossible for them to be saved. They could have been, but they shut their hearts off. They just closed up. They didn't want to hear anymore. There are people today that are just like that. And as we go into the parable of the sower, we're going to see there are soils which are representative of people that are like that. Their heart is hard. They have rejected anything having to do with God, Jesus, religion, period. They're going to live their own life. They're not going to have anything to do with that. And there was many in the crowd that were like that. And that's what he was trying to get across to the disciples. There's going to be some that are just, they're not going to hear. And as we've said, it was prophesied. So that was fulfillment of prophecy when he spoke in parables. But then in the end, there 13 verse 16. Matthew 13 verse 16. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Righteous men. And we think, well, how come they didn't get it? Is righteousness going to get you there? It's not going to get you there. Their ears were still closed. Even though they were righteous men, their ears were still closed. They still couldn't see. Joe.
First James kind of goes into that.
First James?
James.
James 1.
I mean James 1. I'm losing my mind, I tell you.
You have been on a roll today.
I've been on a roll today, I tell you. James chapter 1, starting in 22.
Yep.
But prove yourselves doers of the word, not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in the mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of a person he was. But the one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer. This man will be blessed in what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Is what, maybe you can help me. Is this isn't saying the prophets didn't want to understand it. Isn't this a reflection of what 1 Peter says, chapter 1, that they couldn't understand what they were predicting?
They wanted to see the time of Christ, if we have to take that first.
Yeah, see here it says the righteous people longed, they wanted to, but they couldn't, it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
Yeah, they
Is that
desired
not
to
what
see
they're
Christ.
saying here?
Yeah, but they desired to see.
Yeah, they wanted to,
Yeah,
but it hadn't come yet.
Right, so,
Just like that's what we studied last week in 1 Peter,
Mhm.
where they say the prophets long to understand the salvation of Christ, but never could. Even the angels long to understand it. So Peter's encouraging that we have that knowledge that even the prophets didn't have.
Right.
And that's kind of what he's saying here in Matthew, I think.
Because we have the full word.
absolutely.
We have everything that's been written. They didn't. They had to go on whatever was spoken to them.
Yeah, they were saying stuff they didn't understand.
Mhm. But hopefully, we do understand it. I mean, that's the whole thing. We better understand it. Because otherwise, our ears are going to be plugged. We're not going to be listening for it. So basically, he's saying that they were blessed because their eyes were open, their ears could hear. Any questions on that part? And then we'll probably get started on the parable of the sower here.
Yeah, just to touch on what Dan was getting at, there's many times where Paul talks about the mystery,
Mhm.
and then the mystery revealed. And we live in a time where the mystery's been revealed. One of the people Paul was talking to
Right.
also. But I think that refers back to what he's talking about here in Matthew also.
Well, and it's a lot of it's the spiritual kingdom, which people didn't understand. And I think it was mentioned last week. They were so used to the way things were. Someone comes in and says, hey, now this is something new. How easy is it going to be to accept it?
Not easy.
I mean, not easy at all. Because they're kind of, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we have looked at these prophecies. This is how it should be. And someone comes in and it's got a little inkling of something like that, but that's not the way it should be. I mean, he's talking a spiritual king. We want a king. He was their king. But it wasn't what they wanted.
Well, even the apostles, until the Holy Spirit came upon them after his resurrection,
They still
walked around in a daze, and Jesus even had to tell them a few times, don't tell nobody. Transfiguration, keep this to yourself for now, because they would sound crazy. Because they didn't understand what they were even talking about.
Right.
Until it came upon them.
Is a lot of these parables about the church.
Right.
So if you go over to where we left off last week, part of verse 35, I will open my mouth in parables, I will other things hidden from the foundation of the world.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Ephesians 3:10, you find out what that was. To be attentive now unto the principalities and the powers in heavenly places might be made known through the church, the manifold wisdom of God according to his eternal purpose.
Right.
So now we're going back to this, back to the foundations of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
God's eternal purpose was to save man through the church.
Exactly.
So now he's bringing them through that, and they don't understand it, so he's laying it out little pieces at a time. But most of the parables about the kingdom.
Right. And to think, like you said, from the beginning of time, all the way through the children of Israel, all he wanted was obedience. And they just, nope.
Well, they originally had God as their king.
Mm-hmm.
And
then they wanted
rejected
something
him.
different.
And it's kind of like gone full circle. This is my will, and this is the way it's going to be, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Take it or leave it. So-
Now there is going to be one true king, and accept him. But there again, they didn't want to.
No.
They didn't want to accept him.
They had a different definition of king.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But from their perspective, this was a brand new system. Before, the Jews were God's chosen people.
Oh yeah.
Through the church, Jews and Gentiles. So that had to be a hard pill for them to swallow. They just could not handle that.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you know through your lineage,
You're the chosen.
you are the chosen. We are the people. And this is the way we want it to be. And Gentiles, no, they're not included. Well, it was brought to the Jews. It was brought to them, explained to them, and yet they hardened their heart to that message.
They were told there was going to be Gentiles too, because it said whenever God gave Abraham the promise, is it to all generations?
Mhm.
That was talking about everybody. And there's another place where it literally says Gentiles.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of like, la, 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 they want to hear that.
Oh yeah, exactly. But on the seashore here, were they all Jews in the crowd? Everybody. It was everybody. Joe.
I always think about, when we talk about God's chosen people in Deuteronomy chapter 7, he said in 6 and 7, he said, "For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be his people for his own possession, out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, or choose you because you were more in number than any of the peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But because the Lord loved you and kept the oath which you swore to your forefathers." So, I mean, I think they kind of got a little prideful in being God's chosen. He didn't choose them because they're even special.
Right.
But those Pharisees thought.
But the Pharisees thought that
They did.
And the thing of it is, once this new system came in, what happened to all their lineage? When it was opened up to the Gentiles, what happened to all the lineage? When the temple was destroyed,
Went away.
Their lineage was just-
all the lineage was gone. They can't trace themselves back and say, hey, I am of the... They can't do it. The Jews that were so closed off from that not only lost that part, but they're going to lose eternity in heaven.
Well, remember, even some of the Jews that were converted, they tried to kind of replicate that with the I am of Apollo and I am of Cephas.
Exactly.
And they tried to kind of rekindle that we are the chosen people and I'm special because so and so did this. You know, I'm of a select lineage
Right.
spiritually.
Mhm.
And so that was a habit that still almost could have stuck if it
Oh,
hadn't
yeah.
been squashed early on.
Mhm.
Because of that being cut off from them, some of them probably didn't want to let
Oh, yeah.
go of that. You go your whole life saying that I'm special and I'm a chosen
But
child
now you
of
can't
God.
prove it.
And now
You're gonna
the
try
same as
every way
everybody
you
else all
can.
of a sudden.
Right, to make yourself special again.
Right.
Well, in all fairness, we gotta remember, they had been delivered from Egypt by
Mhm.
Moses. And generation after generation after generation, that story was being told. And they were looking toward a Messiah. And the example they had was what happened with Moses.
Mhm.
And that's what they were looking for. And when you've got a mindset like that, it's hard to get it changed. It's like today trying to teach someone who was raised a certain belief to change.
Mhm.
Well, my grandfather did it, his grandfather did it. I mean, if your grandfather tells you, it's gotta be true, right? I mean, when I was about 5 years old, my grandpa said the only way I can catch a catfish is if I spit on the worm first.
And you did?
And I did it till I was about 20 and realized that's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But you understand what
Right.
I'm parable? Yeah.
Yeah, but they had the prophecies.
Pretty slow, yeah.
It was prophesied, this is going to happen. Okay, now, if your ears are open, would you maybe understand some of that stuff that's coming? Now, Nicodemus, was his ears open? He may have not have understood it completely, but he didn't just close his heart off and say, no way.
But he also did sneak around to get the answers.
Well, yeah.
Came at night,
I
yeah.
still wanted to hold on to
And
this.
and then he didn't really tell anybody afterwards. So,
Yes.
Well, whenever Jesus was born and they took him to the temple, and whenever they were to present the firstborn child, Simeon had been waiting. He had been told
Yeah.
that he would not die before the Christ came, and he recognized him. So
Right.
did Anna. She was spiritual, and that is amazing to me how, they were open
Mhm.
for that prophecy to understand
Right.
what that meant and to see this baby. That's not like what they thought it was going to be.
No.
And so that had to have been, I just always thought that was amazing to me that they got it.
Mhm.
They got it.
that's faith.
They believed.
And
what it says.
looking, just one point, looking at today, we are told that Jesus is going to come back and gather us up, aren't we?
Yep.
We're told that. How long have we been told that in this Bible? Generation after generation after generation, and it hasn't happened.
But it will.
Yes, but how easy would it be to say, it's not going to happen?
Well,
It hasn't happened.
And many people do.
I mean, great-great-grandpa said it was going to happen, and it hasn't happened now.
That's because everybody's thinking from an earthly time frame, right? We
Yeah.
are
Exactly.
not on earth time, we are on God's time.
Mhm.
What is an eternity for us is a blip to Him.
Exactly.
It's going to be.
So when He says the time is now, that doesn't mean 100 years. That can mean 1,000 years, it can mean 10,000 years, but to Him, it still doesn't matter.
But some people could lose heart, lose faith.
Oh, yeah.
They say, it ain't going to happen. This kingdom that they're talking about, this spiritual kingdom, it ain't going to happen. Or this king that's coming, it's not going to happen. How's this baby? How's this guy coming in on a donkey? How's he going to save us? I mean, come on, really? We wanted to have him come in, on a
White stallion.
big black stallion, with a sword and everything. He's going to set them straight. But that's not what happened. And they just closed themselves down on it. They said no. And then they start picking him apart. He's blaspheming. He's claiming to be the Son of God. Prophecies. Their ears were closed to it. Joe.
We've been doing a study on Thursday about leading up to the cross, and one of the interesting points in there was that Barabbas was a zealot. And you think about he was an insurrectionist, basically. Insurrectionist. The zealots are insurrectionists, basically. And so you think about, that's what they were accusing Jesus of. But they thought the zealots were okay because they thought that was their God-given right to rebel against and fight against Rome.
Right.
And
But Jesus was an easy target
yeah.
because the zealots would fight. Jesus wouldn't. Jesus did not fight them. And he was an easy target. And they brought him before, and he didn't defend himself.
Because that was his whole mission, was to not come with the sword.
Exactly. Exactly. Cole.
Real quick, how you were talking about how quickly they turned their thoughts and their minds and their hearts away as soon as Jesus came in a donkey and in this lowly form. How it's interesting how quickly we as human beings, what we think we need, and we have this, we always have these images of what we think we need. Well, I need this car, or I just need this much more money, and all of my problems will go away, or I just need this to happen, or I just need that promotion. And usually what we actually need is a humbling experience rather than an uplifting one. And I think maybe that a lot of that is our carnal nature to expect a certain thing, and when it's not that thing, we're immediately disappointed.
Right.
And turn our thoughts off to it immediately, when usually it's the thing we need the most.
Yeah, how many of us actually think of heavenly treasures when we're here on earth? Because
How many of us are contented with what we have and look to that heavenly home as being the ultimate,
right.
richness. It is mind-boggling how rich this country is, and we get caught up in that life and Satan, that you got to have more and more and more.
And it's
And
around
when
us.
you get it, we need to learn to be content right where we are with what we have and be blessed for
Right.
thanking God for those blessings.
Because it's all around us.
How often do we fantasize about the car breaking down because we need that humbling moment that when we think life's all good and nothing's gone wrong for 2 weeks, I'm doing great.
There's no way I fantasize about my vehicle
breaking down. Please let that car break down and knock me down again.
Because I need it.
Yes.
So there was, the reason for miracles was to confirm what Jesus was saying. And he
Right.
performed the miracles, and that still wasn't enough.
Nope.
So they weren't going to believe anything.
That's right.
And it wouldn't be enough today.
No, it wouldn't be.
If Jesus walked in here and proclaimed himself as the King of Kings and performed miracles, there would still be people that say no.
Honestly, how many of us would believe him?
Yeah, we
If he
probably
came
would.
back
We
a
wouldn't
second
believe it.
time? What if we misinterpreted
that wasn't in the
all the New
scriptures.
Testament
Yeah.
and he came back a second time? How
But-
many of us would believe him?
Yeah. But I mean, that's how it was.
Right.
They just, no, I don't care if he does do miracles. Some people just shut it off. They said, there's no way. And as we get into, I'm probably not going to be able to get into it much, but the parable of the sower is what we're going to be looking at next week. We're going to look at the sower, what he was sowing, and where he was sowing. And we probably all have already in our minds what it's all about. Because it's explained in here on this one. Jesus explains it. But read through that, and then next week we're going to bring up a few questions and hopefully maybe push us a little bit more to see the true meaning of these soils and where we fall in those. Because like I said, we're going to be one of the four. And we always have this idea that we are of the good soil. That we are of the good soil.
The other thing that I often think about is your soil can change. And you don't.
Absolutely. That's one thing. A lot of people say, God made you the way you are, and there's no changing you. If you're not of good soil, tough luck. There's nothing in here that says that. But we can, our soils can change. And it's something that we really need to look at, because when you look at some of these other soils, you think, oh, there's no way I'd be like that. Let's look at things today and how they are affecting us. Because it's really, I mean, it would be utopia if we was in some kind of a commune and there was no outside influences or anything like that to affect us. But we're not. He says you're in the world. And the world has got Satan running around in it. And he is going to try to, any way, any device that he can, he is going to get your mind, your heart, your ears, your eyes to look at something else, to hear something else. And he is really good at it, because he knows where we're weak. And it's really easy to go from good soil to maybe one of them others that's not so deep or a lot of weeds in it.
He's the weed that robs those nutrients.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I doubt if we would, I don't think anyone would go clear to the pathway where it's too hard, where we harden our heart completely. There's instances that it tells us there are people that do that, unfortunately. But that's one of the things that hopefully we would never get there. But just venturing into the other two is jeopardy. It could cost us tremendously. So that's what we're going to look at. Read Matthew 13. Well, it's got several parables there, but we're going to do the sower next week, and we'll see what we can come up with on the study on that.